Every cold morning across this country, thousands of Silverado owners walk out to their truck, start the 2.7-liter turbo, and let it sit in the driveway idling for 5 or 10 minutes while they finish their coffee, because that is what their dad always did with a carburetor 30 years ago. I have watched this exact habit walk into my shop as a bad oil dipstick reading, a check engine light, and eventually a turbocharger replacement more times than I can count. What used to be smart advice for an old engine is quietly wrecking a modern one, and almost nobody has told these owners why. Let us get into it. The 2.7-liter turbo, known by its factory code as the L3B and later the updated L82, showed up in the Silverado starting with the 2019 model year as the volume engine option, sitting between the base 4-cylinder and the V8 engines. It is a small displacement engine asked to do big truck work, and GM accomplished that by combining direct injection with a single twin-scroll turbocharger to make up to 310 horsepower and 430 pound-feet of torque out of only 4 cylinders. That is genuinely impressive engineering, but it comes with a very different set of rules for how you should treat the engine compared to the naturally aspirated small block V8 engines that Silverado owners have trusted for generations. And the habit of letting a cold engine idle in the driveway before driving off is exactly where those rules get violated every single day. Here is the mechanical reality behind why that habit is a problem. When a cold engine idles, the computer intentionally runs a richer fuel mixture to keep combustion stable at low RPM before everything reaches operating temperature. On an old carbureted V8, that extra fuel mostly burned off or evaporated harmlessly. On the 2.7-liter direct injection system, fuel is sprayed straight into the combustion chamber at extremely high pressure. And during that extended cold idle period, some of that fuel does not fully combust. Instead, it washes down the cylinder walls, past the piston rings, and straight into the oil pan, a process technicians call fuel dilution. I had a customer with a 2020 Silverado 1500 who called me confused because his dipstick was reading over the full line despite never adding oil. He idled his truck every single morning for 8 to 10 minutes before his commute, rain, snow, or clear skies, because that was just how he had always warmed up a vehicle. When I pulled an oil sample, the lab came back showing a fuel dilution level over 4%, which is well above the roughly 2% threshold. Most manufacturers consider the point where oil starts losing meaningful viscosity and lubrication protection. That extra volume on his dipstick was not oil. It was raw gasoline that had never burned, sitting in his crankcase and thinning out the oil film, protecting his turbocharger bearings, his piston rings, and every rotating part in that engine. That last point about the turbocharger bearings is where this habit becomes genuinely dangerous rather than just an inconvenience. The turbo spins on a shaft supported by a thin film of pressurized oil, sometimes reaching speeds over 150,000 RPM, even during ordinary driving. That oil film has to be exactly the right thickness and viscosity to keep metal from touching metal inside that turbo housing. When fuel dilution thins the oil out, that protective film gets weaker precisely at the point in the engine that spins the fastest and runs the hottest. I have pulled turbochargers off 2.7-liter Silverados with visible shaft play and scoring on the bearing surfaces at mileage that should never have shown that kind of wear. And every single time, the service history showed a pattern of short trips combined with extended cold idling, exactly the habit that dilutes oil the fastest. A turbocharger replacement on this engine, including the housing and associated gaskets, runs between $1,800 and $2,600 depending on your region and whether the dealer or an independent shop does the work. And that is money spent entirely because of a warm-up habit that felt responsible but was doing the opposite. The part that makes this whole situation worse is that General Motors actually built a fix for fuel dilution directly into the engine's programming, and most owners have no idea it exists or how it works against them when they idle instead of drive. The 2.7-liter uses what is called an active thermal management system, which uses an electronically controlled valve to intentionally restrict coolant flow during cold starts so the engine reaches operating temperature faster. That system is specifically designed around the assumption that you are going to start driving almost immediately after startup, using the engine's own load and airflow to bring it up to temperature quickly and burn off any diluted fuel in the process. Idling defeats the entire purpose of that system. An engine sitting still in your driveway generates almost no airflow through the radiator, barely loads the engine, and keeps that thermal management valve working overtime for a warm-up strategy that was never designed to happen at idle. General Motors even issued technical service bulletins related to oil dilution concerns on these turbocharged four-cylinder engines, addressing owner complaints about rising oil levels and recommending software calibration updates that adjust how aggressively the engine manages fuel delivery during cold starts, specifically to reduce this exact problem. If this is the kind of information that is actually saving you money on a truck you plan to keep, do me a favor and subscribe, because I put out videos every week covering the habits and hidden systems that dealerships never sit down and explain to you at delivery. So what should you actually be doing on a cold morning instead? The correct habit, and the one GM's engineers designed this powertrain around, is starting the truck and pulling out within roughly 30 seconds to a minute, then driving gently, avoiding hard acceleration or heavy throttle for the first 5 to 10 minutes until the temperature gauge shows the engine has warmed up. Light load driving circulates oil through the entire system faster, brings the turbo up to a safe operating temperature gradually, and lets that active thermal management system do the job it was actually engineered to do. I explained this to the customer with the diluted oil, had him switch his routine and put him on a shortened oil change interval of around 4,500 miles instead of the standard 7,500 to help purge any residual fuel contamination faster while his habits changed. 8 months later, his oil samples were back in a normal range, and his dipstick finally matched what he had actually put in the crankcase. There is a second half of this problem that compounds the first, and it involves how often these trucks are actually driven rather than just how they are started. The 2.7-liter turbo shows up disproportionately in trucks used for short commutes, quick errands, and daily driving under 5 or 6 miles at a time, simply because that is the buyer this engine was marketed toward as the fuel-efficient option compared to the V8s. Short trips are the second major contributor to fuel dilution, because the engine never gets the extended runtime at operating temperature needed to boil off any diluted fuel that accumulated during the cold start. Combine a short trip pattern with a habit of idling first, and you have built the exact conditions that accelerate wear on this engine faster than almost anything else an owner could do, short of skipping oil changes entirely. I have a customer, a nurse, who drives less than 4 miles each way to her hospital shift, who came in for an oil change on her 2021 Silverado at what she assumed was a routine 7,500-mile interval, and her oil already smelled faintly of raw fuel with a viscosity that felt noticeably thinner between my fingers than fresh oil should. Her truck was doing everything right in terms of maintenance paperwork, but the actual driving pattern was working against the engine every single day regardless of what the maintenance schedule said. The fix for owners in that situation is not complicated, but it does require breaking a habit that feels intuitive If your daily driving is mostly short trips under 10 minutes, shorten your oil change interval to somewhere around 5,000 miles rather than stretching it to the full recommended distance, since fuel dilution accumulates faster under exactly that driving pattern. Occasionally take the truck on a longer drive, even just once every week or two, allowing quite a few consecutive miles at highway speed to fully heat cycle the engine and boil off any accumulated fuel contamination. And most importantly, break the idling habit entirely. Start the truck. Give it those 30 to 60 seconds for oil pressure to build and stabilize, and then drive it gently rather than letting it sit and idle in your driveway, no matter how cold the morning is or how strong the temptation is to warm it up the old way. The uncomfortable truth about the 2.7-liter turbo is that it is a genuinely well-engineered engine that punishes old habits inherited from a completely different era of engine design. The V8 engines that came before it were forgiving of cold idling because they were simple, naturally aspirated, and had no small spinning shaft riding on a thin film of oil at six-figure RPM. This engine does not offer that same forgiveness, and the fuel dilution problem it creates during extended cold idling is not a theoretical concern. It is something I pull off dipsticks and out of oil analysis reports on a regular basis in my own shop. If you drive a 2.7-liter Silverado and you have been warming it up in the driveway every cold morning because that is just what you have always done, this is your sign to stop. Start it, wait less than a minute, and drive it gently instead. That single change in habit will do more to protect your turbocharger and your engine's long-term health than almost any product or maintenance service you could buy. Like this video, if it helped you understand something about your truck nobody explained at the dealership, subscribe for more honest engine breakdowns every week, and I will see you in the next one. Drive safe and warm your truck up the right way before it costs you a turbocharger.